Good morning. Oh, what a day. What a day. Hey, hope it's a good morning for you. I'm heading to my wife, Anna, is in a triathlon today. So she's swimming, she's biking, she's running. She's crazy. She's amazing. It's not for me, but it's for her. So getting ready to go watch her. She's already in the water. I got kids with me. So I'm on kid duty today with neighbor kids too. So two of my neighbors are in the triathlon and my wife Anna. So heading down there. But before I head down, I had this experience a couple nights ago and I wanted to record it. And I wanted to share it with anybody that this resonates with and anybody that understands this. So I'm going to try to just get through it. But it's all about, I even think the video might be called the new ego, or your alter ego, or understanding once you've gone through a change in your life, something changes with your ego and your ego is different. And so a couple nights ago, I'm sitting on the couch, my arm is around my wife, my other arm's around my little boy, we're watching a movie, and I just start getting this download. And I don't know how to describe those. I don't know if it's just a vision you're seeing or you're hearing an audible voice. I don't really know how to define it. And I realize how trippy and kind of how voodoo that can sound to people, because we all come from different faith camps and different beliefs. So I don't know how to describe it other than I was getting this huge impression and this information, and a conversation started going on inside my head. And the voice just says to me, Ronnie, do you want your inheritance now or do you want it later? And I said, my inheritance now? What are you talking about? And it said to me, do you remember how, because I grew up reading the Bible, so I'm not a devout Christian anymore. I respect and I very much appreciate a lot of faith, but I'm not a church attendee anymore. My wife and I grew up in the church. We have a worship album on iTunes under a band name called the Mighty Orphans. We were a part of church plant, so I was very heavily in the church world, but I left that world, 8-9 years ago, and kind of went on my own atheistic, agnostic journey. So me even sharing videos like this are weird for me, but they're new for me, because if you've known me personally the past 5 years, this hasn't fully been the language I talk in. I've been a little bit more, agnostic, atheist. However, I've had some experiences that are hard to explain. If you know me in person one of these days, I might. But I have gone through something quite interesting, something I would call, that I've heard, many people call it the ego death. Some people could call it enlightenment. I don't like that word because I think it all of a sudden sounds like, oh, I reached enlightenment and all the other people in the world haven't. But I reached my own enlightenment, some light bulb turned on in me. And I realized that light bulb was always on. There was just a lot of stuff kind of covering it up. So I was able to go through a healing process, and shed a lot of layers and pull back a lot of the weeds and things that were clouding up the light bulb of my soul. So, but this whole video is about the old man. So in the biblical terms, you have this process they call of being reborn. And Jesus, the wise, the teacher, said, you cannot enter the kingdom of heaven unless you're born again. But he also said the kingdom of heaven is within. It's in your heart. It's not a future location or reality. It's a reality that is all around us now, and it's something we can enter into. And our heart has a lot to do with it, because our heart is pure, it's eternal, it's pure love, it's pure light, and that exists within us. And so we have this connection, we have this portal to the kingdom of light and the kingdom of love that is going on around us all the time. We don't need to go anywhere else but right here and go within. But a lot of times that's very hard for a lot of us, because our ego gets in the way. And our ego is there, and it's attached to our flight or fight system, and it's designed to keep us alive. So we have this barrier, or a veil, you could call it. So if you guys know the story when Jesus is crucified, and the symbolic, I'm going to just talk about it as a mythology. You're welcome to read it literally. But just symbolically, when Jesus died on the cross, there was a veil in the temple between the outer court and the inner court and the Holy of Holies. And in the Holy of Holies was the Ark of the Covenant, where the religious people at that time said that's where the Spirit of God dwelled. Well, when Jesus died on the cross, the veil of that temple got torn open from the inside out. And it was a thick, thick veil. And so that was symbolically showing that the Spirit of God was not ever contained within a building or in a location. It was going to be poured out on the world like water. And so but that whole picture and that whole story of Christ dying, it's the story of us. So if you can remember the hero's journey, we also die upon our own cross. And the cross that we die upon is everything we believe and everything we've come to know about reality, who we are, what this place is, how we feel about that ice cream flavor, when that person does something to me, why I react a certain way. We're born into the world. We come out of a womb and we're born into the world, but I want you to picture the world as the world is just a larger womb, that you went from one womb to another. And now you're in a womb that's not just 9 months and it's going to physically change no matter what, kind of. You're now in a womb that could go on for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 years, or even a lifetime or more. You're in a womb of the mind. And you're in this womb of the mind, and you're designed for it to, as your mind grows and expands, your mind will reach a place of ultimate discomfort, of depression, of anxiety, of hatred, of anger, of something. You'll reach a place, and many of you, all you have to do is tap in and realize, when's the last time you've been through a phase where honestly in your mind you thought, I don't know if I can handle this anymore. If something doesn't change, I might X, Y, Z. And maybe you're not suicidal when you're at that point, but you're desperate, something in you. And that's a sign that your mind has reached the edge. Picture you're like a baby chicken inside a little eggshell. You know how they say if something cracks the shell from the outside, the baby chicken, it'll harm the baby's growth and it will come out of the shell and eventually die. So picture you're like a baby chicken in a shell and you're growing to a point and you start bumping up against the insides of that shell. And eventually you have to break through that. But what happens is we like get a pillow and we get video games and we get Uber Eats and we create a really comfortable world inside that shell. And that comfortable world is control, it's safety, it's security, it's all of our beliefs, all of our judgments. We create a really comfortable cocoon inside our little shell, and that's okay. That's some of our story. Some of us stay in our shell longer than others, and some of us stay in our shell our entire lifetime. There's no judgment. But something happens in you when by choice you want more. You hear a voice outside the shell. You feel a feeling you can't define. You get restless with your work. You love your kids, but you can't tell why, like you feel disconnected from your kids. You have all these questions, and these questions come from your heart. These questions are these inner longings that there's something more. You can have more peace. You can have more joy. You can have more creativity. You can be free. You could find a job that's more fulfilling. You can fully actually live a life that is truly mesmerizing and curious and crazy and beautiful and full of love. You can. And so what happens is we break out of that shell. Something calls us to it, or inwardly, we attach our intention to it, and we break out of that shell. So again, different cultures call that different things. So in the Christian story, there's this process of being born again, so being raised in the church, I was always told being born again was one thing, and I was told how you get born again. And I tried getting born again 100 times. But I never really did. Maybe I got born again like in inches. But what I experienced a couple months ago was like the most unreal version of that. And it came in such an unexpected way. And it happened in a way that's hard to describe. But I reached this point where I could feel my spirit or my heart asking me, do you want to finally step past this barrier? Do you want to come through the veil between your ego, between your mind, and actually enter into your heart? And it's a scary process, and it takes a great surrendering. And in ways, it's weird. In your mind, you feel like you're going to die. But what happens is when you fully surrender your mind and you show your mind, because also when you're being born in the womb of life, your heartbeat kicks on first. So your heart must lead the way, not the mind. So what we have to do is go through the process of surrendering the mind. But learning to do that, it literally feels like you're dying, because your mind says, if you don't let me run the show, I keep you alive. I make sure you know what bills to pay. I know how hard to push the gas pedal down. and when you're driving, like your ego is very important. So don't hear me wrong. Your ego is beautiful. However, your ego needs to get born again. It needs to die. It needs to die to everything it's built and become in these 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years you've been here. You've developed a belief system. You've developed emotions and feelings and behaviors. And how often do you say, oh, that's not me, this is me? We create ideas about who we are and who other people are. We become very opinionated about everything. And so that opinionation, Anna loves me because I make up words, that opinionation. So that being opinionated is really just a sign of self-comfort. We're self-soothing. So the more sure we have to be about a lot of things is just a sign of how much we're trying to be safe in the little shell that we're in. So many of you probably know what I'm talking about to some degree, but the thing that I want to tell you is this. I'm sitting on the couch and it says to me, do you want your inheritance now or later? And I was like, what are you talking about? And it said, well, don't you remember that Jesus said, store up your treasures in heaven where moth and rust don't destroy. What's up, Bubba? I'm just recording a video. I'm saying hi to some friends.
I can't find my tennis shoes anywhere.
When I'm done with this, I'll help you find them. I bet they're out in the garage.
They're not.
Okay. I'll help you find them.
Inside. They're on the highlights in the dog's room.
I'll help you. Okay.
Okay.
Thanks, bud. That's Maverick, a little man. So, where was I? Yes. So it says to me, do you want your inheritance now or later? And I said, and it's telling me about, do you remember store up your treasures in heaven? I was like, oh yeah. And all my life, it was always talking about you were doing actions and deeds for the kingdom of God, and they were being stored up for your afterlife. And it just said to me, Ronnie, the kingdom of heaven is within. You understand the kingdom of heaven differently now. And I was like, oh my gosh. And all of a sudden it just said to me, Ronnie, this is how it works. When you die and are born again, you enter into the kingdom of your heart, not the kingdom of the ego. In the kingdom of the heart, the rules operate differently. The rules change. And you need to know and learn the rules of the heart, because if you're not careful, you're going to be enlightened, or you're going to get set free, or you're going to break through to some new understanding. You're going to be this new person, but you're going to keep thinking sometimes about the rules of the old way and living by the rules of the mind and of the ego and of the old man. And I was like, okay, wow. So I'm like, how does this work? And this is what it said to me. It said, this is your inheritance. This is so mind-blowing. It said, Ronnie, think of every single fear, every single worry, think of every single wrong, think of every hurt that you've ever done to anyone or anyone's ever done to you. Think of everything you've ever suffered. Think of every nightmare. Think of losing your puppy, your dog when you were 18 and having to put your dog to sleep. I want you to look at all your suffering. And it said, I want you to know that in the kingdom, and then I want you to look at all the good. If we could go back in time and look at all the good you've done that you don't even realize you've done, this all gets stored up, and it gets stored up in here like seeds. You're planting seeds in the kingdom. And it showed me that, like, in the kingdom, I have this field, and it's huge, thousands of acres of all these trees. And every time I suffered, a tree grew. And every time I did something selfless for someone, and I cared for someone, or I uplifted someone, or anything, anytime I did something loving, a tree was planted. And it showed me this miraculous, literally like the Garden of Eden gets created by love, the love within you. So the Garden of Eden is in here, paradise. And it said to me, Ronnie, this is the way it works. Once you are born again, you don't wait till you die to receive inheritance. Right now, by using your own sense of trust and faith and knowing the rules of the new life, the new ego, the new man, you get to tap into your past, and you get to request the return of all the wounds, the return of all the pain. You get to make a request, and it is granted with full permission. And it said, Ronnie, picture everything you've ever gone through. Would you like to get paid back for that right now? or would you like it dispersed out over the rest of your life? I'm telling you, I'm sitting here on the couch and I'm like, literally like almost, it was so hard for me to not talk to my wife and my kid about it at that moment. I was like buzzing. And I'm just sitting there like wrapping my mind around, oh my gosh. And it just said to me, that's how it works. It said every wrong gets repaid. Every wound gets healed. Everything gets forgiven. Everything gets returned. And I wrote a line in a song a couple of weeks ago, and it brought the line to mind. And it said, in the song, it said, love, can you give your all? Do you see that life is kind? And what is given shall return 1,000-fold. That was, oh, it just gave me goosebumps. That was a line in a song I wrote 2-3 weeks ago. And that line came back to me, and the voice said, do you know why I gave you that line? Because that's the spiritual law. Whatever you sow in love gets returned 10, 20, 100, 1,000-fold. So Ronnie, now you know the old you is gone. You've let go of judgments and angers and resentments, and all your defenses are down, and you've gone past the ego. Not to say I don't have tons more to learn and to grow in, so don't hear that in any way. But I stepped through a barrier. I stepped through that veil. I stepped through the threshold of the control of my ego, and it literally changed everything. And from there, the laws operate differently. So here's the next thing I want to tell you. One is if you experience ego death, if you experience an ego death and you have, if you have in the last few years, or if you feel like this is coming for you, I want you to know the next thing. This is almost the most exciting part. It then said to me, so Ronnie, it's up to you and there's no judgment. If you want your whole inheritance right now, I'll give you everything. I'll pay you back you'll get so much joy and so much peace and so much abundance and so much goodness and friendship. And I already feel like I am receiving all that anyway. It's almost too much to handle, all the love that is in my life right now. However, the next thing occurred and it said, Ronnie, do you want to learn? How did it word it to me? It said, do you want to know the new laws of the ego? And I was like, ooh, yes. And then it instantly just said to me, Ronnie, you know how in the old man, your ego is often, the story of the ego is that it drug you down in your old man and the old you? And I said, yeah. And it said, in the new you, the ego flips roles and the ego pulls you up. And I'm like, okay. And it said, you know how the ego was often the thing that you were always trying to control and you were always trying to tame it in the old you, and it was often this thing that you were like wrestling with. And it said the new ego becomes a guide, becomes a mentor, and becomes like supercharged. Your ego is never meant to die, but you have to die to what you and the ego create together and what you believe reality is. So you have to die to and let go of. You have to shed and be willing to open back up and look at things anew. So our ego, because it was so attached to our fight or flight and we were so afraid of death, it became this like charging bull and this like chattering monkey that would be full of anxiety and worry and talking to you all the time and so panicked all the time. But what happens when you kill the ego and you pass through that wall, you actually aren't afraid of death anymore. And so I can't really describe it, but suddenly, for the first time in my life, for the last 8 weeks, I'm not afraid of death. And I'm not afraid of anyone dying because I see life differently. So now that my ego knows I'm not afraid of death, my ego doesn't have to be driven by my cortisol and my adrenaline, and it doesn't have to be attached to my fight or flight because it knows I'm not afraid of those things anymore. So now my ego is also set free to fully be what it needs to be, because it also represents your left brain, your logic, your reasoning. So it showed me, it said, Ronnie, just like in your old man, the ego is the thing that brought about death. The ego in the new man is the thing that brings about life. And it showed me this picture of it, and it said, in the same way you often had to rise your ego up, in the new life, the ego rises you up. The ego becomes like the supercharged you. It becomes like your alter ego. And I was just watching Moon Knight with my kids, the new Disney show, and it showed me the picture of Moon Knight, and it's like this suit you put on and all this, or it's like Shazam. It's like any of the superhero stories. Your ego actually becomes the astral or light body that it pulls you up. It gives you direction. It gives you encouragement. It gives you guidance. It gives you power. It gives you peace. Your ego becomes your best friend in the new you. When you experience the old ego death, your ego gets transformed. And I'm sending this video because a lot of people in the spiritual and new age community and people who are having experiences like this, I've noticed a lot of them keep talking about their ego, and there's like something about the ego they still wrestle with. And I think we have a lot of bad ideas about what the ego is. The ego is you. It's a part of you. It will never not be a part of you. But your ego needs to be healed. It needs to be understood, and it needs to be born again. And you need to literally allow the ego to die, and it doesn't want to. It's going to fight it. And then the ego finds out, though, that everything's eternal. So it dies for like a hair of a second, and then it's reborn. But it's reborn with new understandings, new feelings, new awarenesses. It's let go of all these attachments. So you didn't only set yourself free from the ego. You didn't go through a rebirth and leave the ego behind, and now you're just this spiritual power force. No, you and your ego died. And you and your ego are being resurrected and reborn. And we have to realize, like, oh my gosh, in the same way, I'm brand new, my ego is brand new. Your ego becomes your best friend. Your ego becomes like your companion, your guide. And so just picture your ego, learn in this, if you are becoming awakened, if you are going on a path of enlightenment, however that looks for you, know that your ego is not there to hurt you. Your ego is along for the ride. And if we start by learning to forgive it, we start by apologizing to it for not living in our heart and realizing it had to run the show. And that's partly why it terrorized us in our old self, because we weren't in charge. And so it came in and it was keeping us alive. So now that you've gone through this phase, though, realize your ego wants nothing but to help you. You can learn to just trust your ego and let it talk to you. And the more you open your arms and don't fight it, and you just let your ego is so welcome to show up and knock on your door, just like Mav knocks on my door. And he knows he's welcome in here anytime. I might be busy, but he's always welcome. My ego is welcome in my mind. I'm not always trying to fight it. I think a lot of people are living with anxiety and stress because of how they view the ego, and they live in this daily battle with, I want to rise above my ego this. I see a lot of memes and stuff on Instagram and Pinterest, and a lot of people just always attacking the concept of the ego. And that just shows me on some level that person maybe they're not as awakened as they think. And I hope I say that. I don't mean that bad, but maybe there's things about their own ego death they haven't experienced yet. And so they're trying to, if you are battling the ego, it could be a sign you still haven't fully had an ego death and resurrection. Maybe you've had some of the ego death, but you haven't resurrected it yet. I don't know. I can't get into that. But this video is mostly about letting you know the laws of the new man and the laws of once you die and are born again, you get an inheritance. You are allowed to tap into your heart, into Eden, and go to life and say, I've been through a lot. I'm ready for some of that to get returned to me. Yeah, you are. And you know what? Don't feel greedy. There's no judgment. When you are in the kingdom of love, you get to say, I'd like my full inheritance right now. Right fucking now. I want my whole inheritance. I want every wound that's ever happened to me, everything I've ever done wrong, everything I've ever done good. I want it back. I want it now. Or you can say, you know what? Give me 20% of it. Give me 40% of it. Give me half and then disperse out. I'll draw upon it like a bank account as I go. So it's totally up to you. The choice is yours. So know that you get paid back for everything, and you have the right to get paid back for everything. Secondly, you do not have to war with your ego. Your ego in the new man becomes your best friend. He becomes supercharged. She becomes supercharged. It becomes wise, powerful. It becomes like you, like a Mighty Morphin Power Ranger, putting your hand in the middle and turning into like your alter ego power self. Like you have your normal self, and then your ego becomes your alter ego, your like awesome ego. So just know that. Become friends with your ego. Learn to trust it. Learn to listen to it. Learn to know that there's peace in your mind. Learn that we overcome everything with good, not with evil. We don't overcome evil with evil. We overcome evil with good. So learn to attack the war in your head, the war with your friendships, the war with your own ego. Learn to stop fighting and surrender, and learn to wrap your arms around reality and learn to love things. and learn to not fight your ego. Learn to be open to your ego. Change your mind and your heart about what it means to have a born again ego in that sense, okay? Your ego's born again. And if that's true and he's supercharged and he's freaking smart and brilliant and becomes like a guide, now know you have this ally, not this thing that's in your life trying to always teach you and always trying to pull you down and trying to like drag you down. You now have something like a sail in your boat filling with air and it's trying to pull you ahead. That's your ego's role. It wants to pull you ahead and it wants to be there for you, and it wants to literally now take this whole new person you are and help you accomplish the things you need to accomplish, help you become who you need to become, help you love who you need to love. So you now are not alone. Where you once were alone and you had this pesty ego, you now are not alone and you have this supercharged angelic guide that is really the real you personified. Okay? That's the video. That's the video. If this didn't make sense to you and it didn't jive with you, then just move on. If it jived with you and it connected with you on some level, thank you. I love you. I'm glad it did. I wish you all the goodness and all the best today has to offer. Yep, absolutely. Have a great day, friends. Bye.